Hey guys, and welcome back. Today's review is Emmy and Oliver by Benway. And we are going to see how quickly and efficiently I can get through today's review. It is one that I've been meaning to do for the past couple days, and for one reason or another, it just didn't happen. So here we are, and I'm really gonna work hard to not spend too much time on it. Did I love it as much as I remember loving it the first time I read it? No. I felt like we could have dove into the subject matter a little bit more, if not just gotten to the heart of the matter a little sooner. But overall, not a problem. We got where we needed to go. We have Emmy and Oliver, and they are best friends. When we open the novel, they are 7 years old. Emmy has two other best friends, Drew and Caro has got this note for Emmy from Oliver in which she said, "Do you like Emmy? Circle yes or no." Yes has been circled, so they're all excited. School ends and Emmy watches Oliver get to the car with his dad, and they never see Oliver again. 10 years later, Oliver has reappeared. And for me, that's a subject matter I find incredibly interesting. If you're of my age, you probably know of, I think it was a Lifetime movie. I know My First Name is Steven, so I got a lot of My First Name is Steven vibes here. But if we'd gone the route of My First Name is Steven, it just would have been a different book. So I can't complain so much that I didn't quite get what I wanted in terms of that whole kidnapping thing. But whatever. I'd forgotten what happened. Like, I had no clue what happened in this book. And so when we were starting in on it, I was like, what if his dad kidnapped him? And then his dad kidnaps him. And I'm like, was that me remembering the book, or me just being like, that would be a really interesting take on this story? Literally, I haven't read this book in 10 or 15 years. I had no clue what was going to happen. Okay, look at me. As I said, Oliver has reappeared 10 years later. His parents had been going through a divorce, if not had been divorced. The dad was like, I love my kid. I really don't like the idea of giving him back. I want to be able to spend time with him when I want to spend time with him. They up and go. It was an extended holiday weekend, so they'd had a couple days head start, so nobody even knew what was wrong until it was too late. This has an adverse effect, particularly on Emmy, but sort of on the community as a whole. What it did with Emmy's parents was that they became too overprotective, like they were just too scared. And for me, her parents were probably the weakest part of this novel. Their strictness and their hold on her played a huge part in her journey throughout this novel, and it was kind of an integral part of her character. And while I understood it on a surface level, I felt like the deeper we got into the novel, the more it was played up, but without enough foundation. I get it. You're afraid that this could happen to your kid. But for me, the disconnect came from, well, that was his dad. It wasn't a stranger that kidnapped him. It was his dad. So while, yes, it's a shock that the reality of life is something could happen to your child, why are you so paranoid 10 years later that something is going to happen to your child when what happened to Oliver happened close to home? So there was a disconnect for me in their reaction and their continued hold on that reaction, but we'll get there. Oliver, he shows back up. At this point, we see that Emmy is keeping secrets from her parents. One, she is surfing. She's not allowed to surf because it's dangerous. But Drew, his brother a couple years earlier, had taught them how to surf, and it became her whole entire life. So she's off surfing. Caro shows up, and she's like, look, Oliver has been found. So they go home. The next day, they see Oliver, or she sees Oliver. Oliver is her next door neighbor. And one of the things that I found really interesting is that he was a huge presence in her life. But what he reveals is that he barely even remembers her. And that was something that I wanted to have explored more. One, was he lying? Two, did he remember more than he thought he did? He just suppressed it. I thought it was an interesting concept how they both experienced that same event in different ways, and the ripple effect was completely different because his disappearance shaped this town in many ways, and it was something that she could never get away from. Whereas for him, at some point he did learn the truth, but he had no clue there was even a problem. That's not something that's explored in the novel, but at certain points it will kind of get touched on, and for me it kind of just like blew me back. I was like, wow, it's just so interesting how certain events in life can define people in completely different ways. But she is told, leave him alone. We just got to give him his space. So the first time that he goes to school, they do see each other because they're getting into their cars at the same time, and she pulls this really silly face, and she's feeling really silly about it because she was like, oh, that's totally the wrong thing to do. Gets to school, and she's talking about it with Caro, and Caro's like, not a big deal, but whatever. And this is something that I didn't understand at all. He is something of a local celebrity. And the whole reason that he had come home was his dad had homeschooled him. Like, his dad wouldn't take him to the dentist. His dad wouldn't take him anywhere where he could be identifiable. But he had decided to take this kind of extracurricular science class, and he ended up getting his fingerprints done. So yeah, he's discovered and he's brought home. However, when the police had showed up at his apartment, his dad wasn't there. So his dad is still on the lam, but he's back. He gets to school, and they had strung up milk cartons around and on his locker, and I don't understand that. On one hand, I do, because teenagers are mean. But on the other hand, that was really mean, like really insensitive. And I couldn't grasp the concept of why. And Emmy and her friends excuse it like, oh, hey, they're just being silly. You know, it's just a prank, no big deal. But it is a big deal. So I don't know, maybe it was a sign of the times, and this is a sign of the times that I feel this way, but I thought it was highly insensitive and improper for Benway to put that in there because this kid has been traumatized, and he comes back to school to be bullied and be made fun of for the fact that he was essentially the face on the milk carton. I didn't understand, except that this was an opening for Emmy to come over and have a conversation with him. She makes first contact, but then they go their separate ways. At some point, her mom does say, hey, why don't you take Oliver out? Get to know him. She decides, all right, sure, why not? And then she takes him to the beach. She's like, why are we gonna go to the movies, or why are we gonna go to dinner? Like, let's just go to the beach. She takes him surfing. They go and they have some food, and they have this really great time. He does reveal that his dad had said that his mother had left and wanted nothing to do with them. Well, you know, naturally curious kid, he goes to the library. He essentially Googles himself, and he learns, no, that's not the case. His dad had kidnapped him. Little bit of a spoiler. He got fingerprinted on purpose. He said, if I'm going to be reunited with my mother, this is how it's going to happen. Even more of a spoiler, his dad wasn't at the apartment because he told his dad that it was going to happen. He told his dad what he had done. I actually liked the way that the resolution was handled with his father. It wasn't exactly expected. Like, in the lead up to it, I was all like, no, I don't like how this is going. Like, this guy needs to have his comeuppance. So I was really pleased in the way that she handled what happens with him. That's hard to do because I feel like we all have our tropes in the way that everything is always resolved in a certain way. After spending this time at the beach, they continue to reconnect. He does have twin sisters. His mom at some point had remarried, and the twins seemed to really like him. Did we meet the twins? Not necessarily, but there are a lot of home dynamics that you don't really expect to see coming, because you're expecting it to be this happy family reunion. But one of the best points that was made is that, kind of like with Emmy, and the way that she held on to Oliver and her friendship with Oliver is sort of what the mother had held on to in terms of who she expected to get back. She expected to get that 7-year-old kid back, and she got a 17-year-old back who she didn't know. And I thought that was interesting. I would have loved to have seen more of that, and I would have enjoyed having more of this tension approach sooner, as to where were you? What happened? How did you feel about the whole situation? What was your childhood like? And that, again, was a very interesting concept where Oliver is struggling with his feelings towards his parents. He loves his dad. The rest of the world hates his dad for what the dad has done. But the dad was a good dad to Oliver. And so he's like, I have a really hard time hating him the way that I'm supposed to hate him. The person that I actually hate is my mother, because I grew up believing she abandoned me. However, she didn't actually abandon me. She has been looking for me this entire time. So I thought that was really interesting and complex. And that is where I kind of would have liked this book to have been from his perspective, or at least a dual person narration. Because coming from Emmy, it felt more lighthearted, less serious. But again, that's not the kind of book this was. He eventually is like, why doesn't anybody else like me? Like, why do they hate me? Why do Drew and Caro hate me? She's like, they don't hate you. We're supposed to give you space. The four of them become their own little band of merry men. Obviously, Oliver and Emmy start to become attracted to each other, and this was me just trying to go with the flow, because it's been a couple weeks and already the romance is blooming, and I'm just like, okay, it's fiction, it's fiction, it's fiction. Stop being so critical about the fact that this is happening out of nowhere after this really traumatic event. Realistically, he, in my opinion, would have so much trauma that to have this relationship would be detrimental to him, and even if they did pursue a relationship, it would be far more complicated than it is in this novel, and there'd be a lot to unpack. And again, I just had to take a breath and take the book for what it was. Something that Emmy reveals to Oliver that she hasn't told anybody, even Caro or Drew, is that she has applied to the University of California, San Diego. Her high school has a surf team, but of course she can't join it because the fees, all the other stuff, and letting her parents know. But she does aspire to join the surf team at UCSD. She, at this point, is supposed to be going to community college with Caro, and Caro is assuming that they're going to get a place together, and I liked Caro. Of all of the friend characters, I felt like she had the most incomplete characterization. The most outstanding thing about her is that when she goes to Del Taco, she always forgets to get Drew a burrito. And she has a very large family, and she hates sharing a room with her sister. I think it's Heather. It's either Heather or Jessica, because she's a neat freak and her sister is a slob. There was a lot there that I didn't need. I liked her as a friend. I wouldn't have gotten rid of her, but I thought, in comparison to the other characters, her backstory was really weak. She has all of these post-graduation plans, but she is tired of being underneath her parents' thumb. And to me, what I thought was frustrating was, especially towards the end when things start, truths start coming out, I'm just like, girl, I know this will be hard because it's hard to support yourself when you're 18, but like, you're gonna be 18. Why does it matter what your parents say? You can move out when you're 18 and do what you want to do, and they can't stop you. So for me, that was frustrating because there's all this drama and stress because of how her parents are going to react. And I'm like, okay, so yeah, they're mad that you have been lying to them. Maybe they'll take away your car, but what else are they going to do to you? When you're 18, you can leave. And they're going to have to deal with the repercussions of that, because if you leave because they don't support you, that's on them, not on you. So a lot of things, and I was trying to channel my inner 17, 18-year-old. I was trying to remember how I felt when I first read this book. I probably read this book when I was 24 to 26, so probably close enough that I could still relate, like remember how that felt. But at this point, I was just like, because we've already sort of discussed the fact that when you're 18, you're free as a bird. You're an adult. You can do what you want. But it was almost like no matter what, she was going to be restricted by her parents. I would have liked to have had some kind of a perspective where she took that step back and said, my parents and I are going to disagree. I'm going to have to make a decision, and this is going to force me to grow up. Drew throws a party at his house. At this party is when Emmy and Oliver share their first kiss. And the next day, she's all like, he hasn't texted me, what's going on? The night before, she had stayed over at Caro's, and she had told Caro what happened, but Caro was dead asleep. However, the sister that they actually didn't know if she was even home, like she could have been underneath her pile of clothes on the bed. Yeah, the sister was under the pile of clothes on the bed, and so when Emmy tells Caro about the kiss, the sister's like, that's great, go to sleep. The next day, the sister says something, and this is when Caro's like, excuse me, what? Prompting Emmy to divulge the whole thing. But the whole day, she's like, what do I do? How do I approach this? Caro has advice. Drew has advice. She eventually sends Oliver a text, but she receives no answer back. Turns out that Oliver was under restriction and his phone had been taken away because he had told his mother that he had been going to the movies with Drew and came home past his curfew, which Emmy has a super, I think she has to be home by like 9 or 10. And I don't really know what Oliver's curfew was. I don't know if he knew he had a curfew, but apparently he had a curfew and he was past it. And this is again something that I thought could have provided a little bit more dimension for the novel, because all of a sudden, yeah, well, he has a curfew and he came home past his curfew and he's like, but I didn't have a curfew with Dad. So I think that would have made things a little bit more interesting, because he's battling with what he had and what he has. In this, we do get a little of which one's better. I leave a good thing. Is this not exactly what I thought I was gonna get into? Is this not what I actually want? I thought little things like that could have helped improve the novel and given it more depth. We are continuing. Emmy and Oliver are spending time together, particularly under the guise of her tutoring him, in which she's not actually tutoring him, but they're using it as an excuse to be together. She does go to his house one day, like she gives him a ride home. They hang out in his backyard and they chat. And they chat for a long enough period of time that her parents get concerned, because even though her car's in the driveway, they don't know where she is. Her phone had died or she had turned it off. Whatever the case, they couldn't get in touch with her. And so she comes home and she's in so much trouble. It was hard to relate to because it felt overblown. And I understand that Benway is trying to establish their parenting and their over parenting and their helicopter parenting. It was kind of stereotypical. At the same time, they're like cool parents, but I had a hard time wrapping my head around cool parents who won't let their daughter go to the beach, whose curfew is at 10, and who wouldn't even fathom letting her go away to college. It didn't jive with me, but whatever. At some point, Emmy and her parents go over to Oliver's for dinner, and this is where things start to come to a head because he and his mother have this blowout about how he feels like he's being treated in her house and how she isn't recognizing his feelings and all kinds of stuff like that. This is the stuff that I was waiting for. This is the stuff that I wanted more of. This is the stuff that I wish had happened a little earlier, because I thought there were plenty of windows in which Emmy and Oliver could have talked about his past. Like when he says, "I don't even remember you," I would have been like, okay, well, like what happened? There's just so many opportunities where we could have gotten insight into his upbringing to create a dichotomy between their perception and his reality. But now Oliver, he's really starting to miss his dad. He's really starting to miss home. And he's seemingly regretting his decision to a certain extent. Sometime later, they are having parent-teacher conferences. Emmy's parents are those parents that like to be super involved. So yeah, they're gung-ho about going. At some point, they are informed by the guidance counselor because Oliver has been having therapy. He's been seeing the guidance counselor and he has pointed out Emmy because Emmy, girlfriend, best friend, all that kind of good stuff. And so the guidance counselor, just in passing, because she gets into UCSD, he has told Oliver, but then she tells Caro and Drew. Drew is super happy for her. Caro is not, because Caro, for some reason, unbeknownst to Emmy, because she's like, why would you ever think my parents would let me do this? Caro was under the impression that they go to community college and they'll have their own place together. And so she's upset, and I liked this because I thought this was super realistic. It was frustrating, but in a good way, where Caro's like, you didn't tell me that you were applying to school. Emmy's like, well, I didn't tell anybody. She's like, but did you tell Oliver? And Emmy's like, well, yeah. And so I liked this because I was like, should I be mad? Should I be okay with it? Like, whose side should I be on right now? Because the fact of the matter is, Oliver's been gone for 10 years. Caro has been by her side for 10 years. So why is it that she feels comfortable telling a near stranger this secret, but not her best friend? On the other side of the token, I could see why she would tell Oliver, because there's not as much at stake with him. She doesn't know him, and sometimes it's easier to tell things to strangers than it is to the people that you love. So I enjoyed those moments where I was like, how do I feel about this? Whose side? Like, who's right? Who's wrong? And for a black and white person, I need that to stretch me. Yes, they're at the parent-teacher night. The guidance counselor congratulates her parent. She has no clue what happens. All she knows, her parents are ticked. Get home, they finally tell her what happened. They ground her, and she's like, I'm the only person who gets grounded for getting into college. This is the point where I'm just like, do they not realize they're going to have absolutely no control over her? Why are they trying to oppress her when, in the end, she can legally do whatever she wants? She's going to take the way she feels about the way that they've treated her with her. It could result in her not having anything to do with them. And this whole time, I'm just like, why doesn't she just leave? Why doesn't she just leave right now? Except for the fact she's 17 and really has nowhere to go. I just felt like she needed to take a stand, and I wanted her to do something, to be active. She reveals to them the surfing and all this kinds of stuff. So her mom grounds her, takes away her phone and computer privileges, revokes her car privileges. The dad, however, acknowledges that, yeah, they're holding on too tight. And for me, this was frustrating because I was expecting him to take her side in a way, to maybe not even just take her side, but to maybe talk to the mother and be like, hey, we need to take a step back and really think about what's happened and our role in everything. No. And the dad's not even lenient. He just goes along with what the mom wants. What Emmy does do is she kind of fights for her right for her car, because she's like, well, if I don't have a car, it looks like you get to drive me and Oliver to school. So her mom's like, okay, well, fine. You can drive to and from school, but that's it. And you come home, you get in the house. One day, she and Oliver go to get the mail. They're just kind of dragging the minutes out. And he has a letter from Columbia, which is his dream school. So, of course, Emmy kind of gets in trouble because she dilly-dallied to get the mail, and her mom's like, well, you know this isn't social time with Oliver. What does Oliver have to do with any of this except for the fact that he's something that she enjoys, and the mom just wants to take anything away from Emmy that she could enjoy? The next night, her mom comes up to say, hey, I'm leaving, I have this engagement, your dad is out, you know the drill. You stay here, nobody comes over, which is foreshadowing because the next thing we know, Oliver is knocking on her door and he's really upset. It turns out that letter from Columbia wasn't from Columbia. It was from his dad. But his dad knew that was his dream school, and he knew that if he addressed it like it was from Columbia, nobody would look at it and think anything was strange about it. And what the dad wants is to see Oliver. And he stays over and he's crying and they cuddle and console each other. And so I'm just like, oh, great. You know, the mom's going to come home and everything's going to get found out. No, none of that happens. But the next day, Oliver's like, I want to go. What do you think? And Emmy's like, I don't think it's a good idea. I don't think you should do this. And of course, we all know he's going to do it. Which is where I'm starting to get up in arms because I'm like, just Oliver, for once, do what you're supposed to do, which at the same time, I'm like, but I totally get it. And so I liked the war that was raging inside of me. You know what happens. He goes to meet his dad. Emmy, realizing he's not at school, goes to find him, and I'm just like, oh, great. Now Emmy's gonna get in trouble with her mom. Well, she goes, finds him. The dad at some point says, I'm gonna go to the bathroom. He comes back, they're talking through the whole situation, and he's explaining why he did what he did, and that he's really sorry, and he knew it was wrong, and all this stuff. And then the next thing you know, the police have shown up. Oliver's looking at Emmy, and he's like, you called the police? She's like, no. At which point, it becomes evident that the dad had turned himself in. And this whole time, so when Oliver had first come back, he was on the news, but he is being pressured by his mother to go on this kind of Crime Stopper show to find the dad. And he's like, I don't want to do that. This is the way in which they're able to resolve what's going on with the dad. And I liked that the dad put up no fight. He recognized that what he did was wrong. He'd had the time he wanted with his son. He has his moment to apologize and have all of that resolved. And then he's going to face his consequences. So I thought that was interesting because we don't see that very often. Of course, who shows up but Maureen, who is Oliver's mother, and then Emmy's mom. And does Emmy get in trouble? No. Which I was kind of like, I liked, but at the same time, I was like, that just doesn't feel in character with this mother. And that is where the book ends. We do then have an epilogue, except for the fact that Emmy and Caro have come to terms after Emmy gets grounded. You know, they have their come to Jesus moment, and Carol's just like, basically, it just hurt that you didn't confide in me. And there are other moments in which she was just like, I feel like you abandoned me for Oliver. So I liked the friend dynamic in this book. I thought it was a very special. But the epilogue shows that Emmy is going off to college. Her parents have become a lot more lenient. Like, they've recognized that they perhaps went overboard in their parenting with her. And even though they're gonna miss her, and like, of course, they want to be able to keep tabs on her, I totally get it. She has joined the surf team. Oliver has also fallen in love with surfing. And they're just gonna try to make things work. Drew has gone into college. I forget where he got into college. Carol, he's just gonna go to this 2-year community college, and then we'll see what goes from there. So there we are. It was nice to have a novel that, even though there were some imperfections, it was nice to not hate a book. It was nice to not have everything inside of me screaming for something else, or just to be bored out of my ever-loving mind. I liked the narration, and it was kind of just a feel-good little YA romance with a little bit of heaviness. That is that, and I hope you've enjoyed this. I tried to make it quick and painless because I feel like you guys deserve something nice from me every now and again. Love to hear any book recommendations, and I'll see you around. Bye!